Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Foresight TV. My background looks a little weird. I'm in San Diego. The NIC conference is just finishing up here. And so sometimes I get to broadcast from the road, and it means I have to find what I can take to get to do that. First, I want to say just thank you so much for watching today. I'd like to remind you that in addition to Foresight TV, we have so much other tremendous content. We have the Foresight blog where we put out new content every day, seniorlivingforesight.net. So you can go there to find that content. Subscribe, it's easy. We do other posts on LinkedIn, and on Tuesdays we do a tech show. And so before we get started, this. Hey guys, Steve Moran here. Gina, Jason, welcome. Gina, let's actually start with you. I'd like to have you talk about who you are, the Bob and Diane Fund, sort of your big audacious goal to make the world a better place.
Oh, I try. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I started the Bob and Diane Fund 10 years ago now. This year is our 10th anniversary. And my mom, Diane, had Alzheimer's and passed away at 71. And my father, who was her loyal caregiver and husband of almost 50 years, passed away just 3 months after she did. So I wanted to start something in their honor, and I wanted it to be about both of them since Alzheimer's affected both of them together. And I started the Bob and Diane Fund, and we give grants to photographers who are working on stories related to Alzheimer's or dementia. I had worked at National Geographic for 21 years and knew how important visual storytelling is and how it can make a difference in from people's perceptions to policy. So I decided to merge my two passions, which was photography and helping to find a cure for Alzheimer's. I just felt people who aren't truly experiencing it don't understand it, and having like a visual storytelling can help people understand it and then give them more empathy about it.
So I appreciate this more than ever. As my readers, viewers know, my almost 92-year-old stepfather lives in my house, and he's sort of early stage dementia. And we did a little bit of a senior living journey. It was not a very good experience, mostly related to that, for some of his unique attributes and some of it to the specific with that particular community. But it's really helped me focus on how important the stories are and how much opportunity there is to have people better understand. Diane, you'll understand this, but one of the things that I didn't really appreciate was I have so many of a handful of his old friends who come into this process, and they'll have a conversation with him, or they'll come take him to lunch, and then they want to give me advice about how to create a better life for him. And it's like, well, if you just go do this thing, everything would be better. Or they'll say, we went out to lunch and I don't hardly see that there's a problem at all. And I can see, you see the smile, right? And you say, and it's like, yeah, you think I should go take him to get him on a senior dating site. I can't even get him to take a shower.
Yeah.
And so this is such an important thing.
I also speak to lots of friends who are going through it. I mean, I went through this 12 years ago or so, and I have so many friends going through it. And the one thing I say to them is, do not, to the caregiver, whether that's the parent or one of the parents, don't say to them, they seem fine to me. Because it diminishes what the caregiver is going through 24/7. You could just say, wow, it seems like they're having a good day today, or they were having, during lunch, she did a great job. But to say she seems fine really negates what the caregiver is going through 24/7. And I remember my dad sharing that with me, how frustrating that would be for him when someone said that. And so I always give that advice to my friends who has a loved one going through it.
Yeah, and the other thing that has really surprised me that I'm sure will resonate for you is there's this guilt that you feel even when you know you're doing everything in your hand, because you just sort of feel like there should be something you should be able to do.
Yeah.
And exactly what you're saying is right. You've just got to embrace the moments, and that's why I'm really excited to get into these pictures. Before we actually get to you, Jason, and take a look at some of these pictures, tell me how a photographer how does the process happen? How did you find Jason? How does that work?
Oh, are you asking me how I found Jason?
I don't know. I was sort of thinking, Gina, that's probably yours, but you
Yeah,
can tell me
no,
how it works.
I'll say how I found Jason. So we accept submissions every year in September, and we have a panel of judges who judge the work every year. And we receive around 70 submissions a year from average 25 countries. And this being our going into our 10th year, we've received like 612 submissions over the years from 58 different countries. So this last year, 2024, our judges looked at the work, and Jason's work just really stood up there. Just really came to the top, and we loved the project on his grandmother. And it was very personal, very touching, very intimate moments. And having a grandson document their grandmother in that way was just a really special project for us. So we awarded Jason in November, which we award because it's National Caregivers Month. And so the Washington Post announced our winner, and we awarded Jason Crowley, our 2024 grantee. So I will let Jason take it from here.
So, Jason, I guess my first question is that what's your inspiration? How did you decide you wanted to do this? This is your grandmother, right? So tell me about sort of that kind of your thinking process and all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So she was diagnosed in 2019. It was kind of like in the midst of the COVID lockdown. So it was actually the longest I'd ever not seen her in my life. And so there was already this disconnect, and like me and my brothers live in New York, and well, we all lived there at the time. And so, yeah, I just remember her being diagnosed and really missing her and feeling really anxious about that diagnosis, not knowing anything about Alzheimer's or dementia at the time. It was completely new to me. And so I didn't really know what to expect. I just knew that I wanted to go spend time with her. And then that kind of became the photographs are almost like symptomatic of us spending time together. And then over years, it became this like documentation of her progression and kind of like the changing landscape of her relationship with my mom, her daughter, and with our family as a whole as well. And then,
cool. So I would like to let's actually can we walk through some of these slides, and I'd love to have you sort of talk about them. And so we're gonna put these up here. Is that, nope, that's the one I want there. Add that. I got to take that one off, put that one up. Okay, so I got to start with talking about this title here. I don't know, it almost seems, when I first saw it, first off, I liked it a lot, but it seemed sort of irreverent.
You know, it was the spring of 2020 after she was diagnosed, and my mom and I were driving back from her house. I grew up in a town in Connecticut. She lived in the bordering town. And so we were driving back from her house to my childhood home. And I was not feeling great about how she was doing. and kind of stressed about her having Alzheimer's. And my mom was like, she'll be all right. She's a tough old bird. And it just never left my head after that she called her that.
So I really like that a lot, because I think that what that expresses is realism of how it progresses, and the amount of resilience I see in my stepfather and others. So
Yeah.
here she was still driving.
Yeah, so this was taken, there's a handful of photos from the project that were taken prior to her diagnosis. And this is one of those, this was like maybe 2 or 3 years before she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And so she was still able to drive at the time. And then this photo here with where she's combing her hair, that was kind of the next image that I made of her, which was the first time I saw her after the COVID diagnosis, going home, or after the Alzheimer's diagnosis in 2019.
This is the first time, I can't believe I'm saying this, first time I noticed that bruise on her hand.
Yeah.
So prominent. I don't know how I didn't see that before.
Wow. Yeah. And so when you saw her like this, how did you react to that? I mean, what was that like for you?
You know, it's interesting. Like my brother and I went back to Connecticut together to see her, and we were both really anxious about it. And when we saw her, it felt like fine. Like, not that she was fine. She was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and there was obviously, like, she had a full-time caretaker at that point. She had fallen and hurt her hand. But she was still there, and she was still in her home, and I just felt like a really overwhelming sense of comfort and relief that I could just like see her again. And I took photos just kind of out of habit of just spending time with her. Really.
So are you a professional photographer by trade? I should have asked that earlier. So
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, I am. I'm a professional photographer. I work mostly in New York City.
Okay. And what's your sort of usual sort of subject?
Usually like editorial work, portraits in like the art, celebrity, fashion space.
Okay, terrific. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's continue on with these photos. Talk to me a little bit about this one.
Yeah, those are my nephews. So my sister has these 3 kids, my 2 nephews and my niece, and I was really trying to take a photo of these 4 generations of women in my family. This was kind of right when the project had started taking shape, and I was like, oh, I think I'm following a story here. And I began looking for really specific things, and I staged this photo with my grandmother, my mom, my sister, and my sister's daughter to see these 4 generations of women. And my very rambunctious nephews were really excited about it and just like hopped in the photo, and I saw it happening, and I just took it in this moment where it was just these, like, my mom and my grandma and sister just kind of like reacting to how rambunctious my young nephews were being.
So I love this photo because it just puts a smile on my face. So let's take a look at that.
I'm glad to hear that.
The next one I do, I've got some young grandchildren, and so it brings back that, and they were just here and they interacted with my stepfather. So talk to me about this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was one of the last photos I took of her before she moved out of her house. There was a tree that sat outside her window, and it was hollowed from years of rotting from the inside out, and was going to fall on the house. And it sat outside of the window by her reading chair, and it was she loved this tree. She would sit in the chair, read a book, and look out into the woods outside of her house. And this was taken on the day that they actually had to cut down that tree. And she was kind of recounting the story of her like hollering at these people cutting down this tree in her yard because she didn't want them to do it. And how she told me this story about how she was like yelling at them from the stoop. And it actually turned into this like really sweet moment of her just kind of like holding on, like anchoring herself in her home. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think so often in our industry and in generally the world of providing for older people, we tend to use photographs that are not very realistic of what's really going on. And so, how about this one?
This one was this was the bedroom she shared with my grandfather, who passed away in 2000 when I was 11, the year 2000. And she never actually slept in that room again after he died. And this was right after she moved out. I think this was a week after I took the previous photo of her on the stoop, and that's the dress she was wearing there in the door. And my mom was just starting to pack together all of these, all this stuff, years of her life in the house. And I was like clamoring to organize it and put it in a box because I was like obsessed with keeping all the photos. And this was the mess of that.
And is that the photograph there? Is that your grandfather?
It is. Yeah, it's a young photo of him after he got back from serving in World War II. And
that's very touching. What's the certificate? What's the certificate there?
That's a certificate is for he was a Yale the head coach of wrestling at Yale, and so that really? Was a certification for athletics, I believe. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, and this one. Oh man, look at that! That is stark.
That's my mom going through all these photos. My grandma and grandpa had thousands of photos in their house that they took mostly on an old Kodak Brownie box camera, and so we were going through them, just like kind of separating like the people we knew and the people we didn't know, because I didn't want to throw any of them away, so I started this archival process of keeping all the photos and giving my mom a real headache about it, I'm sure. But that's we were sitting in the old office at her house, just going through all these photos, this endless pile.
So was this after your grandmother passed?
So she actually hasn't passed yet. She's living in a full-time, a full-time care facility. She just turned 97. But this was after she had moved out of the house into that facility.
So can you show her these photos, and does she have memories of who they are or the circumstances?
Yeah. I mean, it depends on the day, and it depends on the images. I show her the photos I make of her and of us all the time. I print the photos myself, so I bring her prints so she can hold the physical copy. The photos of the friends she had in like the 50s and 60s that I have to admit, like her and my grandfather took like some pretty beautiful photos, actually. She doesn't remember those people as well. Every once in a while we'll like hit a chord, and I'll get a good story out of it. But yeah, I'm always trying to like pull some memories out of her and pull some good stories whenever I can.
That is great. Let's look at the. Okay, what's going on here?
Yeah, so after that photo that I took of her on the stoop when she's waving was actually the last photo I ever took of her where she was able to walk on her own. She fell shortly after that and broke her hip. And that's what prompted the or not prompted, but accelerated her moving out into full-time memory care.
Mm-hmm.
Her house was really old and it was just too dangerous for her to live on her own. And so my brothers and I are and my whole family are really adamant about getting her to come to our house for holidays. It can be tough because she's in a wheelchair. So we have to pick her up physically and put her in the car and get her out. And she's a good sport about it, actually. And this is a photo of my brother putting her into the car for us to bring her back to the care facility where she lives now.
I love this because it's clear that she is so well loved by the family. Hospital room, resident room?
Hospital room. Yeah, this was right after she broke her hip. And she had such a good attitude about it. I was like going there and I was like freaking out because I was like, she fell, she hurt herself. I wonder if she's, if it's going to exacerbate the dementia. And I think maybe it probably did to a degree, but there's this like expression on her face that I'd never seen before of her smiling through this pain and just like being okay with it. Yeah, I don't know. I feel people have different reactions to this image. I feel really, really comforted by it.
Oh, I think it's beautiful.
Go ahead, Gina.
What I love about Jason's work is that it's very organic. And the way he's documenting her, it's not her posing and smiling to the camera. He's just getting these moments that, showing that smile, but she's almost, you could tell, a little smiling through the pain. And it's honest, but it's also very respectful.
Yeah. And, it's interesting. I was just having a conversation with somebody here half an hour ago, and we were talking about sort of this idea of resilience. And we have these, we have these things thrown at us. She's got Alzheimer's thrown at her. And because of the history of her life, she's got this amazing resilience. Just, you can still see some happiness and joy on her face, and I really like that so much. So
it's a big part of the project for me, is that resilience and toughness, and just like I think that some people have like a more pessimistic outlook about it than I do. I think that it's really admirable and really strong to hold on and just like I don't know, it's not even dealing with it. It's just, it's just like an incredible strength to me.
Yeah, I like to say that people aren't suffering from Alzheimer's, they're living with it.
Yeah.
And they still are human beings, and they're still contributing to society, to our community, to our family. And you have to treat them with respect in that way. And I think, Jason definitely does.
Yeah, I really like that a lot. As I said, my stepfather's got dementia. I had grandkids who were here over the weekend, and we went out to eat. And he didn't have kids, so normally he doesn't, sort of a little nervous. And there was a balloon artist at the restaurant, and there weren't a lot of kids there, so my grandkids each got a batch of different balloon things. And one they got was a balloon sword that for each of them, 3 years old and 5 years old. And he was sitting right across from me, and he doesn't typically, when we're out, sort of interact too much. He likes being there. And the next thing I know, he reached over and grabbed one of these swords, and he started poking at the kids with it. And he had this big, huge grin on his face. And so you just have to grasp onto those moments like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, let's take a look at this picture that one there.
So this is my mom. So I started photographing my mom as part of the project as well. And because I've been interested by their relationship and the impact that Alzheimer's has had on their relationship, and just kind of how stressful it can be as a family member to be a caretaker, or anyone, even if you don't have to be a family member. I've gotten to know a lot of the nurses and aides at the care facility too, and it's just incredibly hard work. And when you have a personal, significant attachment to that person, it's like made even harder. So that's a lot of those images of her without my grandma are just kind of documenting those moments where she is like alone and dealing with difficulties.
Has it gotten easier for her?
I think it has. Yeah, it's definitely gotten easier for me. It was at first for me, it was like a lot. I was sadder about it in the beginning, and now I just feel like a sense of joy whenever I'm with her, because I'm just like happy that like I get to just see her again, and I don't feel as sad about it anymore. Also because like Gina was saying, like she's not suffering from this thing, she's living with it, and like even against it at times, like combating it. And it was definitely harder for my mom in the beginning. I think it's always going to be harder for her than it is for anyone else.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I, that I didn't really understand as well, and this is sort of more of a senior living thing, is that for my stepfather, he's had a couple of hospitalizations that have been really hard for him. That caused his dementia to really flare up, and some stuff with the restraints, not good stuff going on. But what I discovered is that as terrible as it is, the next day he doesn't remember it. And so in some sense, this picture of your mom is so important, because it's a good reminder that that it endures for the family members, in many sense a lot more than it does for the person who's got Alzheimer's. So
it's harder on the caregiver, definitely.
You
need to make sure you take care of the caregiver and that they are healthy. And that was our concern about our dad, was making sure that he was okay. And he ended up passing away shortly after her, but we just prayed that he'd make it through her life.
Yep.
Go ahead. I was just going to say that I think it's also really hard for both of you, especially when it's a parent. There's a role reversal where the child becomes the parent, and I think that always happens to some degree when you when you care for elderly people in your family. But it's especially it's really there with Alzheimer's patients, like how much that role reversal is really emphasized.
So we've got only a couple more minutes until we're running out of time here. So I want to make sure, are there any pictures on here that I should put up that are important? You want me to just sort of scroll through them here? And let me do that. Let's just sort of take a quick run through and talk to me a little bit about this one here.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was, she's fallen a number of times, really just like trying to maintain her ability to walk. And she fell and hurt her face quite a bit. And I've been navigating a lot, trying to find a way to like document what's been happening to her or her progression through the disease in a way that's honest, but also feels like still like tender and sensitive.
Yeah. You definitely have.
Thank you.
I'm very sympathetic to that, because I'm writing about my stepfather on a regular basis, and I'm more and more mindful. I don't want it to be demeaning to him. So
it's hard to navigate.
I hear it a lot, especially when the Washington Post announces our winner. I do read the comments, and sometimes people really struggle with the fact that we are exposing or taking advantage of elderly people who don't have a say in it. And I don't agree with that. I do think this is somewhat of a collaboration, and other projects we've granted have been collaborations. but they are
Uh-huh.
hard to look at. But that is what Alzheimer's is. And I don't think it's taking advantage of them at all. I would never do that.
Yeah.
I think people need to see the images to understand what this disease is. Because the more you understand it, the more you empathize. The more you empathize, the more you want to give, and then hopefully start funding and donating. And the more funding we get is helping to find a cure. And that is the whole reason for this. So you have to see these difficult images to understand what you go through.
So
Yeah.
we're about out of time. Let's talk about where people can find these photographs to take a look at them.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
They're on our
so
they're on
Bob
our
and Diane
website.
Fund.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead,
They're on our
Gina.
website, the Bob and Diane Fund under grantee, and Jason was our 2024 grantee. So you could find them there. And yeah, we're thrilled to have him representing the fund. I say this year because we give the grant at the end of each year. So, but I'm just honored to have his work represent for us.
These are amazing images. But more meaningful for me this year, right? Because I'm walking this journey, and so I just, it for me, a big part of it is the realism of it. A big part of it for me is being able to say, look, there's a whole bunch of us who are walking this caregiving journey together, which I know is a big part of your story, Gina. So.
Yeah.
Any last words?
Go ahead, Jason.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, you go ahead. You go ahead.
I just encourage people to go on our website, look at all the different grantees' work, and support, either the Bob and Diane Fund or local organizations. And, our focus is to find a cure, and I do believe that we can do that.
And Jason, what have you learned through all of this? And I assume you're still continuing to do this?
I am, yeah. And just like how much humanity is still present in people with Alzheimer's, and just kind of like unveiling the mystique, I guess, around the disease for me. And I think it's really important, if to not turn away from these situations, and to, like really involve yourself in them as as much as you possibly can, to learn about it and to learn about the people that are suffering or living with.
Some are suffering, yes.
And some are suffering. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And so anyway, Gina, Jason, thank you for your passion. Thank you for this passion project. This has been amazing conversation. And hang on for a second after the show is over. And I appreciate your spending time and sharing a part of your lives with us.
Thank you for the invite. I'm very honored.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having us.